Hello and welcome back to Season 4 of the Klassiki Podcast. As ever, I'm your host, Sam Goff. Klassiki is your window into the world of Eastern European film. Subscribers gain access to our library of classic and contemporary titles, as well as filmmaker interviews, video introductions, program notes, and much, much more. You can sign up for a free trial today at klassiki.online. And if you enjoy the show, then don't forget to subscribe in your podcast app, and please leave us a review and a 5-star rating. Thank you. We are kicking off Season 4 with a return guest, one of our very favourite filmmakers, Radu Jude. After the success of last year's gig economy satire, Do Not Expect Too Much from the End of the World, Radu is back in 2025 with not one, but 2 new films. Kontinental 25, which premiered in Berlin earlier this year, is an homage to Roberto Rossellini's classic morality tale Europa 51. It follows an ethnic Hungarian bailiff in the Transylvanian city of Cluj, who suffers a crisis of conscience after the suicide of a man she has evicted. Shot on iPhones, it's a stripped-back account of the tensions at the heart of the European project. And Radu is also putting the final touches on what promises to be an unmissable take on the Dracula legend, so watch out for that one arriving soon. I spoke with Radu about the unique character of Transylvania, why Romania remains such fertile ground for filmmakers today, and the influence of Rossellini on his new work, as well as his approach to reclaiming Dracula from Western cliches. Check out the links in the show description to listen to our previous episode with Radu Jude and to watch a selection of his brilliant short films on Klassiki now. Radu, welcome back to the Klassiki Podcast. Thank you for joining us once again.
Thank you for the invitation.
So, your new film recently premiered in Berlin, and we're all super excited for it to get out there, get a release. It feels like, for people who maybe haven't followed your career for a long time, it feels like maybe a gear shift from your previous film, which had this collagistic approach, had this beautiful black and white 16mm photography. It felt more in keeping with the slightly more avant-garde or experimental approach you've taken in the past. This new film shot in kind of static iPhone tableau, consisting mainly of these 2-shot dialogues, might feel for some people like a bit of a swerve, a bit of a U-turn. So how did you arrive at that? I mean, what's the process by which you kind of decide what the subject matter and then like the form is going to be for your next film?
Well, it's a difficult question because it's a continuous process in a way, and it has to do with a lot of things, a lot of changes or small changes or big changes of perspective or of perspectives about cinema or about Romania. But actually, speaking about Romania, I think it's, if I look back now, I think that this the real decision for doing this film, for deciding to do it, because it was a subject that originated long ago. I started it a few times. I gave it up. I didn't feel the necessity to do it until very recently. And one of the things that actually happened was that I had a grant in Berlin for 7 months, a DAD grant, that allowed me for the first time in my life to live abroad from Romania. I mean, I never been abroad more than 2-3 weeks until then, and that created a certain not a change, but living abroad in a more stable country, in a country much more richer, prosperous, educated, stable politically. I mean, there's problems everywhere, of course.
Sure.
Big problems everywhere, but compared to Romania, seemed like paradise in a certain way. And this is where I realized that when I got back, that in a certain way, I think that that Romania is somehow in an interesting position for people who are doing narrative arts. And I don't want to sound cynically about that. What I mean by that is that the position of Romania from a historical point of view, from a geographical point of view, geopolitical point of view, economical point of view, aesthetic point of view, architectural, urbanistic, etc., etc., is very particular. It's a country that just went out of a terrible communist dictatorship in a long transition period to a neoliberal capitalism with no social protection or very little, and almost getting back to fascism again. We just avoid it in the new elections, but still the tendency is there. Geographically, it's at the periphery of Western Europe, near Russia, near Turkey, or close to Turkey, close to Balkan country. Religiously, it's interesting because it has this heavy Orthodox religion, Christian religion, like a state religion. So I can go on and on and on and point what makes Romania interesting, and all these directions, all these things clash sometimes between all the time between them. For instance, I think starting with 19th century, if not even earlier, Romania was always broken between Western tendencies, people who wanted to consider themselves Western European in a certain way, and that we should belong from a civilizational point of view to Western Europe, and people who were against Western Europe and were in favor of, I don't know, either to be isolated or to be close to Russia or to be close. So this tendency is still there, actually, in different ways. It changes the form. And it's of course a little bit more complex. I simplified it, but what I want to say is that all these things create situations, create problems, create narratives, create stories that don't exist in other countries, or not necessarily in this form. So in a certain way, in Romania, it's very easy to explore the reality. If you decide to do that, you just open the window and there's 100 stories coming to you, just wanting it to find the form and to be told cinematic. So when I got back from Berlin, I said to myself, look, I really feel like the necessity to be in a certain way like Balzac when he said, I want to be the secretary of the French society, and the French society is creating the history in a certain way. So that's why, even if you can say it's a step back, it's a more simple film, more maybe more conventional, although there's things that I'm quite were quite new for me
Sure, sure.
all these things I don't really care about, because the necessity was there to explore the realities in all the films I'm doing. And these two films, I mean, there's a Dracula film, which is of course a little bit something else. It's around the myth of Dracula mixed with the myth of Vlad the Impaler that we have here, plus this film Kontinental 25, which is more a film about the moral crisis, deep into some social, economical, and political problems of the country. So that's a very long answer, but that's the answer. I'm sorry to be so
Well,
long.
it was a very open-ended question. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really interesting. There's so much to pick up on there. I think what you're saying in terms of this position of Romania and how fertile it is for someone in your artistic or kind of critical position. The real through line between Do Not Expect Too Much from the End of the World and Kontinental 25 about this relationship between Romania and this multinational, transnational Western European capital, right? Like the inciting incident in Kontinental 25 comes about because there's this international, I think, German hotel company that needs to evict this guy
Yeah.
in order to build their new boutique hotel. And in your previous film, obviously, you had the main character of Angela kind of running around at the behest of this Austrian
Yeah.
company and so on. So there's already this very kind of potent mix there. And I guess in that respect, right, the setting is so crucial for this new film. And this is something I really wanted to ask you about, because I think a lot of people have a vague idea of what Transylvania is, but I don't think many people outside Romania have an understanding of the particular complicated position of Transylvania in Romania. So in the film, the lead, Osholia, she's an ethnic Hungarian living
Yeah.
in Cluj, in the Transylvanian city of Cluj. And her Hungarianness becomes part of the story and part of the conflict. So, I mean, if you had to briefly explain to people what it is about Transylvania that is so unique and so kind of thorny and problematic in Romania, and how that plays into this film, what would you say?
Well, actually, the Transylvanian connection, let's say, was not a part of the story from the beginning. It appeared little by little because, first of all, I think at the beginning I wanted to do the film in Bucharest. Then, because I'm teaching in the Cluj University, I encounter this city more, and there's a kind of a r- development of the city with good and good and bad parts. Meaning by that there's more money, there's a IT industry around, there's some things around it. It's a very dynamic city economically, or much more than it used to be, and there's a lot of money in the city. And but in the same time, there's of course a growing of inequalities, and a growing of a crazy real estate business is in the city, and but also outside, because the city is somehow between the hills, city of Cluj, and it develops outside. So there's one village that was a few thousand people, and now it's 10 times more or 11 times
Mm.
larger, with no good infrastructure and made very hastily. And so it's a kind of a mix of things that made me decide to somehow place the story there in this Transylvanian city. And in the moment I did the casting, and I did the casting for both films in the same time, basically, because actually I shot both films in the same time. That's the kind of lesson that Monte Hellman used to say about how he shot Right in the Whirlwind and the shooting at the request of the famous B movie producer.
Roger Corman.
Roger Corman, where Corman said, "Well, if you're on location, you have a crew, you have the horses, you have the sets. Why not make two movies?" So I said the same because of the desire of what we spoke before. And when I invited the actors from Dracula to appear in this film as well. And one of them was Esther Tompa, who's a Hungarian ethnic. And in the moment I cast her, I realized that all of a sudden the film opens to a new dimension. And what is this new dimension? It's the fact that Transylvania is belongs to Romania, and I think that's totally. It should stay like that, since all the international treaties and all the EU institution and all the international recognition says that. But like many territories all over the world, and in Europe especially, it didn't always belong to Romania. Before 1918, it belonged to Hungary, and it's because of that. After the First War, and also part of Transylvania 1940 was taken by Hungary after Ribbentrop-Molotov pact, then got back to Romania in 1944 or 1945. So it was always this back and forth of Transylvania, and that made people, or well, especially politicians, but not only, use it as a kind of hot potato,
Mm.
trying to capitalize on fears that sometimes can be justified. That people say, oh, Viktor Orban wants to take Transylvania, which might be somehow in a crazy way true. But before that, it was always, these Hungarians want to take Transylvania, and Hungarians are somehow, some of them, of course, pissed off by the Romanian, especially Romanian authorities, kind of racism against them, if you want, or nationalism. So it's always, if you really open that thing, there's a kind of darker thing outside. Actually, our fascist candidate that almost won the elections started his political career, if you want to call it so, by going into a Hungarian grave of fallen soldiers from the, I don't know, First World War or something, and trying to desecrate these graves, etc.,
Right.
etc. So you can imagine it's the kind of idiotic thing of using historic history as justifying for all kinds of insanity. And since it's a story about property in a certain way in Continental 25 or loss of property, etc., and things around property, I felt that to inscribe this story in the big history, it's
Right.
when also there was issue of ownership of Transylvania, etc.,
Mm.
etc., and all these useless and insane discussions, it would enrich the story a little bit.
Yeah, it really plays into this exploration that I pick up on in this film and the previous film of this idea of the border and the lack of the border and what they mean
Yeah,
in contemporary Europe, and especially within the EU, right? There's this kind of fiction of the borderless Europe, certainly within Europe. Here in the UK, we no longer have that anymore, thanks to our Brexit vote.
yeah.
But it's always an illusion that the border has completely disappeared. It's just that the policing or the discipline moves around and moves into different spaces. So now it becomes the job of this Transylvanian bailiff in your film and the gendarmes that accompany her to kind of enforce this property right on this ground level.
Yeah.
Because in the macro sphere, if you like, you can travel between Romania, Hungary, Germany, it's fine. But then the violence and the policing just gets displaced into a different location.
Well, yes, sure, and I think there's this or the film goes around about this difference between justice in the meaning that justice has for a state
Mm.
or for authorities for enforcing it on people, and the human attitude towards what would be just, where of course things can be and should be, I think, differently if we are really human. It's like and actually I think that's well put in Romania, because we are living in a state with not so much social protection compared to other European countries, no progressive taxation. So there's a lot of problems that creates this kind of justice served in the sense of state point of view, but at the level of people, you can feel it's something is deeply wrong there, and that was actually something that was seen at these elections, where people who voted for the fascists were doing it in a kind of anger and revenge
Mm.
towards the state of things, where they felt somehow some of them, at least, I mean, maybe not everybody, because there's a lot of Russian interference and Russian propaganda as well and other kinds of things, but at least there's a lot of people who felt it's not just that they work as much as others or even more, and they are like second class citizens or have to move away from the country in order to make a living, while others, it's the have and have nots, like a never ending history of that. So,
And then I guess the other, if we're trying to find ways of describing this continental picture, the other thing to touch on would be Rossellini, right? Because
mm,
this film
mm,
is, well, I don't know what word you'd prefer, a response to, an homage to, an updating of the great
yeah,
Rossellini film, Europa 51, which was this kind of portrait of the moral crisis in Europe in that kind of immediate post-war era. I'm really interested about this, like Rossellini. Like, what is it about Rossellini that you think is super particularly valuable today, or was it that you just wanted to really kind of like address yourself to that particular film? I mean, how is Rossellini functioning for you here?
well, it's a lot of things here, because first of all, if we think about this film, actually I saw it long ago and rewatched it again a few years ago, because Andrei Gorzo, the Romanian film critic, wrote a piece about this film connecting it with Graham Greene, which to my shame, I don't know much. I mean, I know, of course, who Graham Greene is. I read one or two novels, but that's it. But it's very important for him. So I watched again the film after his essay, and all of a sudden I remember that project that as I said, I tried a few times to make and couldn't find a way. And the structure and the themes and the way Rossellini put them gave to me a kind of idea of how to structure that film as a kind of answer or homage or updating the themes, all three of them, as you said. That made it easier for me in a certain way to work, because maybe I need that. I know there's great filmmakers or less great filmmakers or all kinds of filmmakers that can work in a kind of a void, like, I'm making a film and that's it. But for me it's a bit difficult to do that. I always need a certain model or a certain counter model, sometimes something to go against, something to go like, I don't know. It's always I cannot start from the scratch, from the white page, so to speak. So that's one thing. The other about Rossellini, I think, is the fact that I feel more and more like someone to follow. I mean, I feel Rossellini like someone to follow, like a kind of a teacher, because there's a few things I find inspiring. Not only his great quality of some of the films, because not all Rossellini films are good.
That's certainly
But
true.
yeah, but the fact that he tried so many things. I mean, in Rossellini you can find no comedies, you can find neo-realist drama,
Yeah.
you can find the kind of theater-like films, you can find TV movies, you can find documentaries. It's a very, very rich way of making the films. That's one thing. And then I think he always had this, not only this experimental the desire to experiment, but also a kind of how should I say, love and hate for cinema in the same time, which I feel at my own level, of course. Also, I feel a kind of interest and a lot of love and affection for cinema, and a lot of despise and a lot of hatred in the same time. And I read a lot about Rossellini, and actually I saw his TV movies, and not many people know. Actually, everybody knows about them, but not many people really watch them. And although they are all on YouTube, it's like 20 films, and all of and they are considered very bad, and in a way they are very bad, but in the other way it's the expression of this desire for experimentation, and the dislike of cinema is as of in the way it was done back then, or at his time, in his time. And also, how he edited, Rossellini edited his films at double speed.
Yeah.
I read that. So he didn't care about his own films. He just put them fast, the images, and he made the cuts, and then he showed the film only at the end in the in the normal speed. So that says something about him. That's why his films are somehow edited so a bit sloppily. You see, so this perspective, this attitude that Rossellini has about cinema is something that I feel it should be more used as a model, because nowadays it's a lot of people who are either crazy cinephiles or driven by only financial interest. I don't know.
Reminds me of what you said about TikTok when we spoke about your last film.
Yeah.
That there's something. You're right. I'd forgotten that anecdote about Rossellini and his editing, but there is something very modern about that kind of disregard that's kind of baked into this love-hate relationship to your own images.
Actually, yeah, but about TikTok, I was somehow ironized. There's a lot of ironies when I did that, not only in our interview, in our discussion, but also in ITFA, in a discussion with Orban Irabia in international in Amsterdam festival, documentary festival. And people say, "Oh, he doesn't realize that TikTok is toxic." Of course, I realize. Of course, I know how terrible propaganda, fake news, all these things go with TikTok. But there's a lot of creativity now. The film critic Andrei Rus and a film teacher, film historian here is every day making a lot of TikTok selections and make them a story on Instagram, on TikTok, and on Facebook using them. And actually, it's amazing to see how rich can be this short TikTok video sometimes, and everywhere in the world, of course, but also in Romania, there's a lot of kind of popular creativity, the creativity of the people expressing itself sometimes in TikTok videos. For good reasons or bad reasons, it doesn't matter. But there's a creativity, there's some originality, there's a lot of use of all kind of filters or kind of AI generated image or montage things, and sometimes pure documentary image is very, very, very strong as documentary. Of course, now I'm not saying that all films should be like TikToks. I'm not saying all films should be 1 minute long and posted, but it's something that as a filmmaker, if you're serious, you can see that all of a sudden a platform like that, which has like 1 billion eyes of the phones and can get into all kinds of places and in the hands of all kinds of people, and collectively they are 1 million times more creative than you as a single filmmaker with the heavy machine of cinema can be.
It reminds me of Vertov,
That's a
Ziga,
problem.
Ziga Vertov. His idea, his idea of the cine eye was that there would be millions of people with cameras all
Yeah,
throughout the
yeah,
world, constantly
yeah.
capturing life and then kind of filtering it through that
Yeah, yeah,
lens.
yes. It's really it's like that. It's yesterday he posted and they posted there were some videos of someone mocking the new president we have, which actually I still hope he's a good guy. He's not a fascist at least, and a pro-European at least. And there was someone in the countryside filming a guy with a costume, another peasant who was marching, like in a presidential. Like the investigation, and they put on the soundtrack the national anthem, and he was just marching very seriously alone in a dusty countryside road. So you see that and it feels like an avant-garde
It's a great
gesture.
image.
It's a great image, you see, and you see that I say, oh my god. I mean, I as a professional filmmaker, I would never imagine something like that, and in a second. Or another video, it was with some workers in the in I think it was in Belgium, some Romanian workers, and they did a video. They were repairing a prison. They were fixing a
Right.
prison, construction site of a prison, and at some point they made a mockery, going from door to door and calling the names of Romanian politicians who
I
are
see.
going to be inside. It is really funny. It's like Mel Brooks. It's like,
It's really interesting what you say about not liking to work from the blank page, as you put it. Wanting to find these models, or not models, but reference points and comparisons to start from. Because one of the pleasures watching a Radu Jude film is the intertextuality, right? Is the noticing the references and the quotations. In Continental 25, we've got Brecht, we've got the historian Tony Jude. I noticed we have a lot of Buddhism, which is an interesting one, and a very intriguing snippet on TV of the great Ulma noir Detour from 1945. Can I just ask what Detour is doing in the film, or is that just a pure coincidence that I shouldn't read too much into?
not really. I mean, it's a coincidence because I needed something that the woman is that the main character of Shoya is watching on TV, and we didn't have money, so I decided to find some public domain films, and then I
Okay,
found out Detour is one of them, and all of a sudden it all made sense because Detour is about someone who commits, who's considered a murderer, although he didn't
right.
kill anybody, and,
A
and here is
crisis of
someone.
conscience.
Yeah, so here is the opposite, is someone who is considering herself a little bit of a murderer while everybody else tells no, you're not. So I thought it's interesting the opposite. the opposition. Also, I think Detour is. I felt a little bit about my film about Continental that it I could define it, forcing a little bit the terms, like a noir film that doesn't really start. I mean, it could transform it. It could become itself in a second. A noir movie, if I don't know, someone would come to take revenge
Right, yeah.
from the side. So it's a noir film that is done with only with words and
Yeah, it's like a
paper.
noir film where without the narrative that drives
Exactly,
noir.
exactly,
That's a really
exactly.
good
Yeah,
point.
yeah. I felt that, well, maybe that's an exaggeration, but I started to feel the film, to think about the film a little bit like that, a little bit like noir.
And the final question I wanted to ask you, Radu, before we let you go, is you've made mention to this other film that you shot simultaneously, which we know is going to be about Dracula.
Yeah,
So again, just speaking as someone from quote unquote Western Europe, if there's one word that is associated with Romania for people from
yeah,
this part of Europe, it is Dracula.
yeah.
And a lot of cliches and stereotypes and
Mm.
historical misunderstandings wrapped up in those connotations. So, I mean, I'm sure you don't want to tell us too much, given that you're still working on the film, but what was it about Dracula that you wanted to get your teeth into, if you excuse the joke there?
Well, actually, like many Romanians, we are not particularly obsessed with this myth. It was imposed on us little by little after the revolution, after 1989. Before 1989 revolution, Dracula was like a taboo topic. The novel was not translated in the communist times. The films were not accessible, so we knew a little bit about it. And then about after that, it became like a tourist attraction for many people in and actually we shot a big part of the film in Sighișoara, which is the birthplace, and the house is still there of Vlad Dracul, Vlad the Impaler, who was the prototype in a
Right.
certain way of cruelty that gave rise to the myth of Dracula. So there's these things, but I was never realized I would make a Dracula film. But at some point, I pitched it just as a joke to some producers and distributors. With my producer at that time, Ada Solomon. We were in the Cinemart in Netherlands in the co-production market. And the moment I said that, everyone said, "Oh, that would be very interesting. I want to see this movie." And then I said, "Well, then I have to make it somehow." So I read the book and I found it a great book in a certain way, but I couldn't do anything with it. So then I said, "What can I offer?" And I said, "Well, as a Romanian, I can offer, and you will see in which way a kind of going back to the root of this myth, going back to Vlad Dracula, Vlad the Impaler, going back, mixing the myth of Dracula with the myth of Vlad the Impaler, which actually was used, and I didn't know because I shot before, was used by the extreme right wing here as their logo. Vlad the Impaler was the logo for
Oh,
for
right.
the
Okay.
CS was
Slightly
there.
concerning, but never mind.
Very concerning, I would say, because it's like a proto Hitler. Bloody, but and then there's a lot of taste, campy taste, if you want, or a taste for campy, pulpy stories. I You can find in the film in some literary adaptations. It's a very literary film, and it includes many stories, and one of them is the a free adaptation of the first novella with vampires from Romania. It's
Right.
like 100 years old. So there's a lot of things there, and I don't know. I'm quite proud of the film, but well, it has to be seen.
And do you think it'll play differently for Romanians versus, I don't know, this Dutch producer who initially took you up on the
There were
idea?
not Dutch, but no, the market was in Holland, but the producers were from all over the
Okay.
world. If it will play differently, for sure, for sure. For sure, because I think Vlad the Impaler means a lot to Romanians, and it was used in many, many ways by the fascists in the 30s and 40s, by the communists later on, by the nationalists and new fascists nowadays. So there's a lot of things that go against the grain of that. And of course, Dracula means something for us and something for the Western world. So I don't know how it's gonna play. I'm positively sure it's gonna feel different, but I don't know in which way. Yeah.
Well, can't wait to see it. And it's great that we get two Radu Jude films so close together. Always a treat.
Well, yeah, I'm happy. So let's see.
Well, Radu, thanks so much for stopping back
Thank
in
you.
to talk to us about your new films. And yeah, can't wait to see the Dracula film as and when that appears. But thank you very much, Radu Jude, for coming back onto the Klassiki podcast.
Thank you once more for the invitation.